And we're back on Big East Energy Weekly with Aaron Torres, Casey Matthews. Big show today. Casey's already tired of all the UConn talk. But I will tell you, if we're going to get into this house ruling stuff, UConn's the weirdest version of this in the Big East. Because
in America, there's
they
no
have
school
football.
like them. Yeah.
They have football. They're a Division I school. They're not an FCS school, whatever.
Is UConn the only school where the fan base wants to give less to football? Like,
probably
we're giving too much. Like, I think that has to be the only fan base in America. It's like, no, football, too much. We don't need that linebacker. We're good.
No, it needs to go to Gino's bonus or a dance bonus instead of getting an outside linebacker that can tackle the quarterback. Casey, what are your thoughts on this as a former member of an organization that didn't have football, and then obviously there's some in the Big East that do, and they're at a lower level. Like, what are your thoughts? Like, as the lone person that is not in this world.
I have a follow up on that, by the way, that I'm curious.
Go ahead, Casey.
About. Yeah. Go. You want to ask me now, or
how much? I don't want you to put you on the spot and ask about Creighton specifically, but
yeah, sure.
I mentioned this a minute ago. There's this notion that the Big East, well, they can spend $20.5 million on basketball, and it's like no Big East school, including UConn, state supported, has $20 million to spend. This isn't the SEC. This isn't the Big Ten. How much realistically do you think, like, the upper end Big East schools that don't have football, that don't even have to worry about it? Because again, there's this notion of, oh, well, Xavier could just spend $20 million on their roster. The Big East TV contract, I think, pays like $8 or $9 million a school. So are you just making up, like, are you just printing? I don't understand. So I'm just curious how much you think realistically the percentage of that 20.5 is actually being used by Big East schools. When I say used, they don't have access to a full 25, but I'm 20.5, but I'm just mostly curious.
Yeah. I mean, percentage wise, I don't even know where to begin on giving a percentage. I think you're right on the money. Like, I mean, both of you guys, like, they're not going to spend 20.5 like on basketball. Like, if you did, I mean, just thinking about that from like a recruiting perspective, like how you would even do it. Like what kind of roster would you build with 20? And I only think there's a couple teams that, if you gave them the money, could still put together a roster that would make sense. And that's probably a really deep topic, because I think everybody on the surface is like, well, why? You have the money, just pay everybody. But like, there's more to it than that, because you also have to factor in like guys that are returning, things of that nature in terms of building a roster. I think, like, I can't, obviously I don't know the number. I would estimate this, like, because it's not just the TV money. So you're also going to have ticket sales. So a place like Creighton, 17,000 people, and it sells out every game. So you've got money from that you're going to be able to use. So there's more to it than just the TV contracts.
Sure.
The interesting thing about the UConn situation with football that I do think, I mean, not only is it men's basketball, but it's women's basketball too, which that puts them at almost at a disadvantage, because they are going to have to disproportionately spend on women's basketball, but they're not competing with their league. Right. They're competing with the national landscape of women's basketball. And I think that's a differentiator, because as a whole, you look at you build your roster. Like, certainly there's teams that's we got to build, like Duke, you're always building for a national champion, but there's plenty of other conferences where you're just not, you're building it to win your conference and then give yourself a shot in the NCAA tournament. So I think that's a factor. But I don't know. I mean, I think being able to spend, I think you could put together a competitive roster right now in the 6 to 8 million range in this league. Now, SEC, Big Ten, I don't know, but I don't know. Is that low?
No, but you know what I was going to say is if specific to UConn, and then I'm going to get to your comment about a competitive roster, like nationally, just like in baseball, if you have a open, pocketbook like the Dodgers. You just pay everybody whatever, because it doesn't matter. You're printing money at that point. But if you're the Pirates, you're being or even like more successfully, like in the past. I know the A's aren't exactly who the Oakland A's used to be because they're not even in Oakland anymore. But if you're talking about Moneyball, like that's what college basketball is going to end up having to be. It's not even the haves and have-nots. It's going to be, who did you hire as a GM that can maximize and stretch your dollar and find these diamonds in the roughs, these mid-major guys who aren't going to get $4 million to go play in the ACC or the SEC, but will take $400,000 to come play for Creighton, or $300,000 to. And I'll give you a good example, because since he doesn't have social media, we can't tag him on it. Cam Spencer got $250,000 more offer from Miami before he went to UConn. And I know he took $250,000 less to come play for UConn and coach Dan Hurley, because that was what he wanted to do. Now, could he have easily have just gone for the most money? Absolutely. And I'm sure players will continue to do that. But that's where you're going to talk about culture, and we're going to talk about, bringing in guys because we're winning. As far as UConn goes, the breakdown, if we're talking 20 million, 10 million is going to go to the men. About 4 million is going to go to the women. It has zero to do with equal anything, because for $4 million, you can build a hell of a women's roster. For $10 million, that's kind of the going rate for the men, and 7 million is going to go to football. Like that, if we're talking about the breakdown, that's kind of where it's going to be. Yeah. And for other sports, we're talking about not only just their basketball programs, but the other Olympic sports maybe getting a little bit of money here and there. But it's going to be interesting.
It's a fascinating topic. It's a fascinating topic. I think you brought up the GM thing, and I don't know if people quite understand how big of a deal this is right now. And if you look at a great friend of mine, a friend of AT's, Corey Evans, Corey was one of the scouts for the Thunder. And I'll give him all the love in the world here, helped tremendously in building that roster that just won an NBA championship. Corey left mid-season and went to work for your boy, Mark, at Cincinnati.
Yep.
As the GM. And if you look at the roster that they built, it's a great roster. And they feel great about it. They think they're going to compete and have a chance to be a big player on the national level this year. But if you look at Corey's background and what he's done, he's been a grassroots guy. He's the guy that knows everything about all the young guys coming up. And that's why they hired him in the NBA. And now you have him in college basketball. And I think what you're going to see is more and more of these kind of guys, because you got to try to find a competitive advantage. The money is going to be at some point a wash. How do you find the advantage? And it's going to be, I think it's going to be personnel, and 1,000% at that level.
I initially was skeptical about Asabasa Spice Company, because whenever we're talking about dry rubs, or could it be any better than something that I get at the supermarket? And the answer is undoubtedly yes. My wife was cooking in the kitchen, just doing some baked chicken, and she went into our pantry unbeknownst to me and was like, didn't say anything, but she's, I'm going to try the seasoning that we got from Asabasa. And in that moment, she went and looked at the signature chicken seasoning. Put it on the chicken, let it sit for a little bit. For convenience purposes, sometimes we don't use the outdoor grill. We will, throw some chicken thighs or some baked chicken in the oven or pan fry it, and it was phenomenal. And I wasn't the first one to try it. My wife was. And that to me is why you need to try this. Eat ad, people are skeptical. Just try it. You get 15% off. Use the code big flavor 15. It's literally that simple. Check it out, asabasaspice.com. Code word big flavor 15 for 15.
AT?
One, if you could have Corey return my texts and calls, because I texted him like 4 times and I'm busy, I'll hit you back. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Make sure we clip that and tag him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
text him.
care. Yeah,
I'll text him.
Just not right now because I'm doing a podcast right now. No, so I think it's 100%. And the other thing that I find interesting on the national level, I mean, I probably get asked this, more during the season and the off, like the early part. Well, what does a GM do? And I just think there's this big misnomer about like the GM is the dude that's handling the cash. And I'm like, yeah, that happens. First of all, it's interesting because literally every spot, the role's a little bit different, which is, 30 NBA GMs, I'm guessing they all pretty much have the same responsibility, the same report to this person. These people work under them. Where it's like, you look at Cincinnati with Corey Evans. He is a grassroots guy that knows everybody. He's not, hey, we have this much budgeted for this much budgeted for that. North Carolina, on the other hand, they have a former agent who is very clearly more of a money guy. And, I think now that the roster's together, it's okay. But it's like they missed on a lot of dudes because they don't have those relationships in the building. I think, the guy that UConn has is the perfect kind of guy in the middle where Tom Moore knows everybody. He knows the JV coach at this prep school in Boston, but he also knows the biggest boosters at UConn too. And so, like, I just find that part about the GM role fascinating is that what Tom is, and I haven't talked to Tom. I certainly haven't talked to Corey, but whatever. We'll talk about that off air. No, okay. But I'm guessing Tom Moore's role is slightly different than Corey Evans' role. Corey Evans' role is definitely different than Jim Tanner at UNC. Andrew Slater at NC State is in his own world doing something completely different than what Jim Tanner and Andrew Slater, I can tell you, are not the same people. So right. I just find that part interesting. But I would agree with Casey is I think it should, if I was in charge of hiring the position, I think it's much more about relationships and getting in the doors with people. And like you said, Casey, well, this kid, he had an ankle injury his junior year, so nobody really knows how good he is, as opposed to just, well, we have this much money, let's spend it on that guy. And it's like, the more we get deeper into this, I agree 100%, is I think the relationships are so important. I think the other thing too, is it's almost the inverse of what you think it is, which is it's not just about having the most money and spending the most money. It's about allocating it properly. Right. And getting value for different spots and different players. And then, by the way, and I think this is another really important part of it, is players coming in and regardless of what they're making, understanding the role that they're being asked to participate in. And I'll throw it back to you guys really quick, but I actually thought UConn did a great job of that in late May, early June of, hey, we'd love to have you. You're our 11th guy. There's going to be nights you never play, but you're going to come here, you compete for a Big East championship, hopefully for a national championship. And they added some really cool pieces on the back end. It's an evolving thing, but I think it's a really fun thing if you're like guys like us that like to nerd out on this stuff.
No, I agree with both of you guys. I think you're going to see a mixture of this, right? I think there's going to be different philosophies. There's going to be, it wouldn't surprise me if you found some guys who are, not necessarily, like we're talking about, like, let's say like Mississippi State, right? That's an SEC school, but Mississippi State doesn't scream, basketball, right? Not a lot of schools in the SEC do, but they have the resources for it. But if you're Mississippi State, maybe you're going outside of the box. Maybe you're trying to find a guy who recruited so well at the mid-major level that you're trying to pick off like all of the best mid-majors like Chad Lanier or Dalton Connect to come to your school the way Tennessee did. In Rick Barnes. And maybe that's the GM role that you're going for. Or you're Mike Rispoli and you have $1 billion, so you don't need to do that. But like either way, like there are multiple ways you can skin a cat. So like I think that's what you're going to see. And I think to your point with Tom Moore, having been a coach, having had all these grassroots ability, you're relying on more support staff than just your general manager to bring in talent. All right, I know Aaron has a hard stop here in about 5 minutes. So I want to get your early thoughts on the Big East in terms of, you mentioned it being top heavy. Is it really UConn, St. John's, Creighton, and then everybody else? Or is there a sleeper team that you
Let me
think
ask you.
could
Let
jump
me
in
ask
there?
you guys. You guys talk this stuff every single day. I mean, I think like inherently at this point, you just trust Shaka Smart to have like an NCAA tournament caliber team. But I don't really see it. You know, there's interesting pieces at Providence. There's interesting pieces. I'll say this really quick, and I know I'm myself short on time. But like, I actually think Villanova is kind of an example of what we just talked about. Of they raised all this money, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I don't know who's making the decisions, but like, I think they overpaid for a lot of guys because they had all this money, and they're like, we got to get some people because we keep missing. So, Nova's got a couple interesting pieces, but I just, and again, I'm curious because you guys talk about it every day. You guys have so many great contributors that even know these teams better than I do. I just don't see it in a lot of places outside of those big 3, maybe 4 with Marquette. So I'll defer to you guys, to be perfectly honest.
You can't do that. You can't do that. You gotta, if you're on the show, AT, you have to give a early Big East prediction.
Okay.
I know it's in the. I thought that was in the
starting
bylaws.
from 11 to 1. All right, 11. I would say. By the way, Georgetown, I think, is another example. They, they put all these resources in, and it's like, where are you in year 3? Now, it's not all his fault. You don't think Thomas Sorber's a one and done when you recruit him. Anyway, so yeah, I'm not going to give a full ranking. I'll say this is that I do think, and I know it's something, Mark, you've talked about a million times on your show, is like the Big East show, the UConn show, is UConn St. John's is very clearly officially a rivalry. Mm-hmm. And those two guys very clearly do not like each other because I think they're cut from the same cloth. And I just think that's great for the league. So listen, yes, do I think they're 1-2? I do. I'm not saying this because I'm a UConn guy. I do value a little bit of year-over-year continuity. And so because of it, I'd probably lean UConn. One thing I'll say, though, and I've said this, is that, like, if you actually look at St. John's roster, it's like, oh, they're just as athletic and just as tough as last year, maybe more so athletically, and they're way better skill-wise and talent-wise now, or at least offensive talent-wise. So how do the pieces come together? Is Ian Jackson really a point guard? I think that's probably the biggest Big East question, if you will, is like, is Ian Jackson a true one? Can he run your offense? We'll find out. But listen, obviously, I think those two are right there. I actually think what Creighton did was a little bit underrated because they did so much of their work early. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I would lean UConn over St. John's, but like, damn, man, you look at St. John's rosters, like they got so many freaking dudes.
But just tell me this before, and when you got to go, you just hop off. But just tell us this: who's your 4-5? And that's what I'm really interested because I think 1 through 3 is pretty. Everybody kind of gets that, but who's your 4-5?
I would listen. I'm going to default to Marquette figuring things out, and the thing that they do have, which obviously basically nobody in college basketball has, is like year-over-year continuity where they actually have dudes that have been in the program. Mm-hmm. So I would probably put Marquette in that 4 spot. I guess, I think there's some interesting pieces that came in at Providence. Listen, I like Duncan Powell, who's obviously from Georgia Tech. Jason Edwards was a dude like, I think the thing with Jason Edwards is like, he's a 6-foot combo guard that wants to get buckets. So it's like you kind of have to build things around him. But I would say Marquette 4. I might say Providence 5. I know people are going to talk Villanova, this, that, but that's probably where I would go. Where are you guys at?
I'm going to give you guys not the shock because Casey's heard me talk about this. I'm going Xavier 4.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm going Xavier 4 and I'm going Marquette 5, not because I love Shaka and I hope he proves me wrong on that one. But yeah, I'm going Baby Patino and that roster of random guys from the Mountain West that we've never seen play, but they're big and they're athletic and he's a good coach.
Real quick, isn't that exactly what we were just talking about, what Richard Pitino did at New Mexico? Oh, JT Toppin, this 3-star dude out of Texas. Oh, Big 12 player of the year next year. Donovan Dent. Oh, he's really good. Oh, UCLA making $3 million this year. Like those two dudes alone are hitting a hard cap in most of the rest of college basketball right now. But like those were dudes that were undervalued. Now it kind of sucked that New Mexico kind of became like a a feeder system for bigger
Sure.
programs, but that's exactly what you kind of need to do at that level is get guys, hopefully keep them for a year, and then, you know, you move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, I'm going to give you one name to look for. Surprise, maybe all Big East performer, Malik Moore from Xavier, 6'5"
Okay.
shooting guard from the Grizz, Montana. Yeah, I think you're right. I think Richard Pitino's done a good job with what he's had, and had to kind of bring guys in. So they're my sleeper team this year. So I'm going to be, you know, big Cincinnati fans are going to hate me. Xavier fans are going to love me, because I'm all in on Richard's team this year.
I actually think that's why Corey Evans isn't texting me, because you're so
probably
high
true.
on Xavier, and it's like he's.
And I hate Skyline Chili. Is that why? That's probably,
yeah.
That's probably
All
why.
right.
That's why Wes
We're gonna
doesn't text me back.
We're gonna get Corey's gonna text you, AT. He's gonna text you today. I'm calling.
Well, now it's a guilt text. It's not a
Yeah,
I
it
want
is a
to
guilt
catch up
text.
and yap text. So it's okay.
Maybe I'll just wait. I'll send him the link to the pod. He'll watch it and
Yes.
who can see it.
Hey, bro, you got a shout out at 2722. Check it out. It's me yelling. Yeah. No, it's okay. He's great, by the way. I want to establish that he's one of the best people.
Shout out Corey Evans. Shout out my boy Wes, Cincinnati, former Big East member. All right, let's get Aaron out of here. This has been another episode of Big East Energy Weekly on the Big East Energy Network. We're out.